A Woman Killed with Kindness is a renowned play written by British playwright Thomas Heywood. First performed in 1603 and published in 1607, the play revolves around the married couple, Master John Frankford and his wife Anne. The central action of the play unfolds with the arrival of a houseguest named Wendell, who takes advantage of John's hospitality to seduce Anne. When Frankford discovers the betrayal, he chooses to isolate his wife, leading her to embark on a path of self-destructive self-punishment. Interwoven with this storyline is a subplot focusing on Sir Charles Mountford and his virtuous sister, Susan. Despite her brother's attempts to exploit her sexuality to settle his debts, Susan steadfastly refuses to comply. Through these intertwined narratives, Heywood explores themes of female sexuality, the dynamics between men and women during the Elizabethan era, and the prevailing social norms of the time. A Woman Killed with Kindness is regarded as Heywood's masterpiece and continues to be read and studied today. The play's plot draws heavily from an Italian novel by Illicini, which was translated and republished in William Paynter's The Palace of Pleasure in 1566. A Woman Killed with Kindness opens as John and Anne Frankford celebrate their wedding in the company of friends and family. Anne's beauty and her submissive nature towards her husband are widely admired by all in attendance. During the wedding festivities, Sir Francis Acton and Sir Charles Mountford make a wager on the upcoming falconry competition. The following day, Acton and Mountford participate in the competition, releasing their falcons into the field. Acton loses the bet and accuses Mountford of cheating, triggering a heated argument that escalates into a violent brawl. Mountford ends up killing two of Acton's men. Susan, Mountford's sister, urges him to flee before Acton seeks revenge, but he refuses to abandon her and is subsequently arrested by the sheriff. Meanwhile, Frankford relishes his blissful married life, cherishing the presence of his young and virtuous wife. This is when Wendell, a member of the hunting party, arrives at the manor to deliver news of the fatal fight. Impressed by Wendell's composure, Frankford invites him to stay as a guest in his house. While Frankford's loyal servant, Nicholas, harbors suspicions about Wendell, he keeps his thoughts to himself, as do the other servants. Mountford, desperate to secure his release from jail, exhausts his fortune and turns to the loan shark, Shafton, for financial assistance. Unbeknownst to Mountford, Shafton harbors ulterior motives, planning to exploit the debt to acquire Mountford's ancestral house and win Susan's hand in marriage. Within Mountford's residence, Wendell becomes infatuated with Anne, despite wrestling with his troubled conscience. And, in a vulnerable moment, confesses to Wendell that Frankford desired him to fulfill his role in the household during his absence. Overwhelmed by his feelings, Wendell declares his love for Anne, who initially resists, but eventually succumbs to his persuasion that she can love both him and Frankford simultaneously. Unbeknownst to them, Nicholas eavesdrops on their encounter and vows to expose their affair to Frankford. As Mountford's debt to Shafton matures, Shafton attempts to purchase his house, but faces resistance from Mountford. In response, Shafton has Mountford arrested. Upon learning of Mountford's misfortune, Acton, seeking revenge, decides to seduce Susan. However, upon meeting her, he genuinely falls in love with her. Frankford returns from his trip and discovers the truth from Nicholas about what transpired in his absence. Determined to uncover the full extent of the situation, Frankford closely observes his wife and Wendell during a card game with the guest, Cranwell. It becomes evident to Frankford that Nicholas had spoken the truth. Meanwhile, Susan, unable to secure help for her brother from her uncle or wealthy acquaintances, receives an offer from Acton to settle her brother's debt. She refuses Acton's offer, but he proceeds regardless and anonymously clears Mountford's debt. Mountford, upon discovering Acton's involvement, becomes furious, and Susan confesses her belief that Acton's actions stem from his infatuation with her. Overwhelmed by his indebtedness to Acton, Mountford believes that the only way to repay him is by arranging Susan's marriage to his adversary. At the Frankford household, Nicholas presents a fabricated letter, orchestrated by Frankford, stating that he must embark on another business trip. Wendell, delighted to have his romantic rival out of the picture, wastes no time in seducing and once again. However, Anne's conscience torments her deeply. Unbeknownst to her, Frankford has been observing their every move. He breaks into the house, attacks Wendell with a sword, and is prevented by one of his servants from committing murder. Filled with shame, and pleads for Frankford to end her life, but he deems death too merciful. Instead, he banishes her to a small house on the estate, where she is to live in seclusion and never see him again. Mountford proposes to Susan that she offer herself to Acton in exchange for the settlement of his debt. Susan objects, upholding her virtue, but Mountford insists that he cannot find peace until Acton is repaid. Reluctantly, Susan acquiesces, and when Acton arrives at their residence, Mountford begrudgingly presents his sister as payment. Acton is deeply moved by this gesture. As a wealthy man, he had never imagined marrying someone of a lower social status, but he declares his pride in taking her as his wife. Meanwhile, Anne is sent into exile with her loyal servants. Before her departure, Nicholas presents her with a lute, yet her thoughts are consumed by the marriage she is leaving behind. Wendell, who has also come to regret his actions, encounters her on the road and attempts to express his remorse. However, Anne, fearing that she may be tempted again, instructs the coachman to drive away from Wendell and take her to the house where she will spend the remainder of her life in solitude. Some time later, Frankfurt receives news that Anne is on her deathbed, her health deteriorating as she never recovers from her grief and remorse. He rushes to her side while she is still alive and grants her forgiveness, allowing her to find peace and depart this world with a clear conscience. After her passing, Frankfurt requests that her epitaph describe her as a woman slain by her husband's kindness. Thomas Heywood, a prominent figure in the Elizabethan and Jacobean theatre, achieved recognition through works such as A Woman Killed with Kindness. Although only a few of his plays have survived, it is believed that he was involved in the writing of over 200 plays. Heywood also excelled in poetry, prose, as well as the creation of masks and pageants. Alongside William Shakespeare, he is considered one of the pioneering contributors to English theatre. I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave a like if you did and be sure to subscribe. Thank you.